The TV is on, your friends are ready, and now it's time to get the food. Grubhub is here with your order. Don't just plan for a successful Sunday night watch party. With Grubhub, you can plan for the whole football season because Amazon Prime members get a year of Grubhub Plus for free. That means paying $0 on your deliveries from your favorite restaurants. Go all the way to the end zone with Grubhub. Download the Grubhub app today or visit goforgrubhub.com/Amazon to know more about our Amazon Prime deal. Terms apply.
Your favorite podcast, Therapy for Black Girls, is celebrating 5 years of empowering conversations as we continue to make mental health and wellness accessible. In addition to weekly chats with some of your favorite mental health professionals and other experts, we've flipped through the pages of your favorite romance novels with author Tia Williams, checked in with Grammy Award-winning artist Michelle Williams, and talked hurdles in sports, motherhood, and mental health with Olympic athlete Natasha Hastings. From our team to your podcast app, join us in celebrating 5 years of the Therapy for Black Girls podcast. Check it out on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. What's up, podcast humans? Hopefully you guys are doing great out there. I am doing well. I'm actually in Arizona, but that doesn't stop this podcast train from rolling on. First of all, thank you very much for all of the well wishes and all of the downloads and listens and spreading the word of the 500th episode with Milo from Descendants. It was awesome. Just to kind of stop down and celebrate for a moment. So thank you very much for everybody who participated in that. And if you haven't listened to it, it's always there. It's available for whenever you want to consume that particular interview. Anyways, today I have another legend in my mind and in many other people's minds on the podcast. I have Sergio Vega from Quicksand. Also spent many, many years in Deftones, and he recently departed over a contract issue. It's like these things happen from a professional business perspective when you're talking about a band like Deftones that is, an institution and a business. And they just ultimately decided to part ways. We talk a little bit about that in the interview, but Sergio plays in Quicksand, and Quicksand not only are legendary within the post-hardcore scene and have some unbelievable records out. They have been putting out records the past couple of years that are incredible as well. And so Sergio is an interesting dude. I spoke to him previously in another business capacity when I worked at PETA 2. And it was very cool. But Sergio, sweetheart of a dude, and he's just a lifer. It's really, really cool to be able to pick his brain. So that's what we do. First of all, if you can do me a favor, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or drop some star ratings on Spotify. All of those things help. Or just tell your friends, because that is the best way that this podcast can get into other people's heads, is by your friend telling you that this thing is worth their while. So I would appreciate that if you would do that. You can always email the show at 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. I have some pretty exciting news to share in the next week or two about a potential live podcast engagement. I'm incredibly excited about it. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to tip my hand too much more, but I'll be very excited to talk about that. But let's dig into Sergio. Okay. Actually, hold on. Let me talk about a show I just went to. I got to see a band called Slow Crush, which, if you are not familiar with, just get familiar. They're an incredible band. I'm going to have them on the podcast in the near future, but got to see them and just got to go to a lot of shows recently. Saw Knocked Loose, saw Kubla Khan. It's great to be able to go to shows and feel like you're part of it again. So anyways, shout out to all those bands. Great shows. Thanks for having me. Thanks for allowing me to watch your bands perform, because that's why we go to shows, right? So anyways, here's Sergio. We talk all about his life in Quicksand, his time in Deftones, played in Absolution. He's done a lot. And Sergio is now doing a lot of solo stuff as well, which will be announced on, I know, his Instagram, which is at SmurfedOut, for those of you that are following along there. So, let's talk to Sergio. I distinctly remember watching Quicksand I was probably 12 or 13 years old, but you were touring with The Offspring. And you were
yeah.
Yeah, playing the Brent Event Center here in Irvine, California. And it was interesting because at that time, like, you know, for the most part as a kid, like you just, you know, pay attention to like, oh, there's the singer, there's like the lead guitarist. And like in general, I think bassists don't get any love. And, you know, I'm not trying to blow smoke up your butt, but, you know, people maybe just don't pay attention to that instrument as much as others. But I remember you playing and I was just like, that dude's got a cool vibe. Like, I was like, I never really recognized the bassist before.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like maybe you are I probably too close to kind of speak to this, but you know, maybe you can speak in generalities of just the idea of, you know, where bassists exist in bands and how commonly, you know, you kind of are left to your own devices, making sure that everyone's, you know, together and tight and what have you. But do you notice kind of generically speaking is sort of like lack of love for bassists, or am I just like being hyperbolic here?
No, it's there. That is a thing. What's interesting for me, like, hopefully I can say this succinctly, is that I didn't grow up with a rock background.
Yep.
And I grew up more with freestyle and electronic music and hip hop, and my mother playing a lot of Latin music and things that were bass forward. And when I picked up the bass, you know, it was inspired by reruns of television shows like Tom and Jerry and Partridge Family. And I had no idea that the bass wasn't a lead instrument. And I just picked it up and just started playing and did a cover band in school. And when I got into the punk scene and hardcore scene, I started to, you know, I got a bass and kind of was like, tried to do bands and started writing immediately. But what I quickly noticed, to your point, was that what people were looking for, guitar players, were bassists to kind of fill out their songs. And they kind of had songs. And oftentimes they didn't have songs. They had this kind of like loose idea of something, maybe some chords. But to them, they were the songwriters and you were filling that out. And that kind of just was like, that was a shock to me.
Right.
And it was really a shock, to be honest. And I was just always like, so I kind of didn't really do those types of projects. I usually started bands or joined bands and came in writing right off the bat. But then noticing, you know, like when you're with Quicksand and in projects, people don't perceive bassists in rock as being like a principal person, you know, or a compositional component. So that's something that I've had to understand and know for quite some time, and like, you know, basically in a sense, get over, you know.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and I really like how you articulated just that idea at the inception of it, of that the, you know, bassist isn't, you know, like the quote unquote lead instrument, as it were, just like you not understanding that concept initially and then just being like, oh, I see where this is kind of like going from here, you know?
I was like, oh, snap. I was like, because then, you know, it was a trip.
Totally.
But I, it also kind of inspired me in terms of like, helped me really evolve as a writer, and it helped me evolve as ultimately becoming someone who could play multiple instruments and sing, so that I can really protect the ideas of my core love, which is bass.
Right. Totally. Like being able to express yourself in other instruments and in other ways, so that it's not just, you know, because I mean, especially as you could probably testify within punk and hardcore, bassists are usually just like, okay, you could sort of play guitar, but like you're a good hang, so we want you to be in the band. It's like not necessarily the first thought.
I always think there's a couple of archetypes, and there are two especially. They're the ones who are, like you're saying, they're just kind of like holding it together and they're playing like root notes and they're kind of just there. And then you have on the other end the ones who are super players who are trying to find their personality and expressing themselves in a song. And they are really like playing a lot and doing a lot of fills, and they're using the song as a foundation to express themselves through it by overplaying a lot. And for me, like with my musical influences initially, the bass, like let's say with reggae, the bass is a foundational musical instrument. The parts are the meat and potatoes, but they're not busy, but they're essential. And that was always something that I would draw from rather than most rock musicians.
Right. That makes sense. And we'll explore some of those ideas a little bit further, but you, just focusing on you as a person, I know you were born and raised in the Bronx. What was your, I guess, family structure like growing up in regards to brothers and sisters, mom and dad in the house? What did that look like?
I had, when I was younger, I had one brother with my parents. My father and mother divorced when I was young and went up with a second brother later. And growing up in the Bronx, my family were visual artists. And with my mother having a lot of love for music and then transitioning into being an author and someone who put on concerts. She has an organization, and she had one that she was at the time, other ones over the years. So I kind of grew up with a lot of Latin music. Mm-hmm. I have a cousin who coincidentally is named Chino Moreno as well. And he got me into music. And through him and watching reruns of television, I kind of just thought music was really cool. My cousin, I thought, was the coolest. And when I was really young, and his friends were cool and they were musicians. And that was that was my youth, but my thing was primarily visual arts. So like, I like to draw. I got into writing graffiti and painting on trains when I was really young, and somehow pivoted over to music in my teens, like my mid-teens. Mm-hmm. The rest is history. I just hit the ground running, trying to make bands and trying to write songs, and I wasn't self-taught. I was in orchestra in school, but as far as like my education and writing and arranging, that was all just from experience.
Right. And what sort of visual arts did your mother participate in? Was she like, I presume painting, but like, what was she, working with?
Painting. My father was doing acrylics and oil painting. My mother was more like watercolors and acrylics, but then got into doing like screen printing, and so that was kind of the vibe when I was like really young. But then pivoted over into writing and having this organization where she was putting on shows. So I was like around a lot of Latin musicians when I was really young.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, you were just experiencing all of these different ways that people creatively express themselves, but that was, normal to you as opposed to people that maybe kind of reverse engineer that process.
Yeah, it was the thing. Like what I had to work on over time was my day-to-day life. Like, you got to like do dishes and do laundry and stuff, right? Like the creative part was always like pushed.
Right. Yeah. It's like, hey, this is the normal life you got to take care of. And it's like, what? Really?
I'm like, huh? Those bills are not, yeah. Right. It's like, oh.
Yeah. Oh, I guess I got to do that at some point. Mm-hmm. And just kind of, our armchair observation of you from all the times that I've, either watched you perform or just existed alongside of you. You've always seemed, a very introspective and thoughtful person, and definitely not like the person that walks into a room and is like, hey, everybody pay attention to me. Where would you put yourself on that spectrum? Like as far as maybe introvert or extrovert, like what were you, I guess, as a kid? And then was that something that, you kind of grew into in regards to being more outgoing or vice versa?
I think I was in general, like a bit of both. If I was in a comfort zone, I was outgoing, but I was easily taken out of a comfort zone. And then I was really reserved. And, finding a balance of that over time, was something that was interesting because I don't know, like, what possessed me to think I wanted to get on the stage and play, but I really wanted to do that. And, but in general, I don't need to be the center of attention or the life of the party. I feel like when you're putting out, you're not taking in. And I have, I've developed over life the opportunity to do both, where I get to perform and I get to just give. But even then, I'm aware of my surroundings and I appreciate the energy that's coming back. And if I'm chilling, like I get to hang out and just kind of fall back and observe all the coolness around me. And that's the kind of thing that keeps you fresh and keeps me inspired.
Sure. Yeah. Seeing how other people can exist in the world, that can definitely position yourself appropriately alongside of that.
And just pick it up, subconsciously. Like there's so much information and stimuli going around, like whether it be in real life or be online or, through friends' conversations and through things. And like, you have so much of an opportunity to learn and be inspired. So I like to take, I love listening and I like kind of hearing and then I've worked hard on also, I always wanted to give people space to reveal what they wanted to, but I learned over time that, asking questions about people's lives and situations are good, and they want to know. They won't necessarily tell you,
Sure.
And giving of yourself and being transparent is also very good because it allows people to connect and know you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny because I'm sure you've experienced this where it almost seems counterintuitive, where the idea of sharing more of yourself that could reflect back on you. Cause some people have that idea that's just like, oh, the more I keep to myself, like, I can just eat around the edges and understand other people. But it's like, well, people don't necessarily want to share if they don't feel like it's some sort of reciprocal conversation.
Yeah. And it's something that I really learned in my relationship with my wife, the value of putting my guard down and having unnecessary boundaries of like who I am and what I am and actually projecting those same needs onto people by not asking them about themselves. I spent a lot of time not connecting because I had it wrong, but like that fueled me as a player because that was a chance to let everything go.
Sure. Absolutely. And your trajectory in regards to, school and kind of the life path that was set before you, did you find yourself caring about studies in school and kind of the next steps in regards to doing a career and that sort of stuff? I mean, I know that obviously punk and hardcore really, swallowed you up, but was there any sense of that before that?
No, I am fortunate that life worked out the way that it did because I grew up, I wanted to be a baseball player. I was like, I didn't have a sports family that you need in order to become one. But I did have an artistic family. And when I got into music, I had a better foundation for that. And when I got into punk and hardcore, I literally was naive enough to think, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this punk thing. I am not going to make a living. But I'm going to be creative for the rest of my life. I see my mother is, she has made a career for herself as an artist and someone who does events, and she seems happy and healthy. And I have no skill. I have no other plans and no knowledge of even like, I have no business mind. I have nothing. Just going to throw myself into this music thing. And thank goodness that, that the passion I had for it and the dedication I had for it aligned with good circumstances in the world that allowed for me to have a living and make a career as a musician. So yeah. I really, really appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, especially as you so succinctly put it, you have no other skills.
I didn't. It's like, I mean, what do? I can draw, I can cook, I can do these things, but my life was set on a path of being some sort of creative entity from a very young age.
Right.
With no other thought. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I was like, that's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, and I think too, I mean, once you start to experiment, especially within the, DIY punk and hardcore scene, you feel that opens up the world so much to you that you're like, oh, I can like do anything and I can go anywhere. Not even so much from a practical idea, but just the transportative nature of music where it's like, oh yeah, this is all I'm going to focus on now. Like everything else will kind of fall into place after that.
Yeah, 100%.
Band merch is the best thing ever. Rockabilia is the best thing ever. This promo code is the best thing ever because it gets you 10% off your order, 100 words or less. Like I said, 10% off. You will be able to dive into that website and purchase all of the clothes for your friends, family, or yourself. And trust me, Rockabilia is the best place to do it because all officially licensed. They have over 500,000 items in stock ready to ship to you. I actually just recently got a really, really cool limited edition Under Oath t-shirt from them. And it's awesome. They do all of these really cool exclusive things. So I highly recommend you going to rockabilia.com, buying from them, a rad independent business run by people who really, really care about music. So thank you, Rockabilia, for your continued support. And again, 100 words or less, 10% off your order. Do it up. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We've all been there. Life's going good. Relationships are awesome. Work's great, family life's great, and then all of a sudden, some things start to happen. A wheel falls off. You, maybe have some issues at work, and then all of a sudden you're in a spot where you feel bogged down and you might not know who to turn to. You're like, I don't want to bug my family or friends with this stuff. That is why I wholeheartedly endorse therapy. I've used it myself, and I think it is an incredible tool. That is why I love working with BetterHelp, because if you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. That is the key point. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge if you feel like it. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can absolutely get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/words today, and you get 10% off your first month. Please use the code, and that way you can sign up with BetterHelp and live a more empowered life. That's betterhelp.com/words. Try therapy.
BetMGM, an authorized gaming partner of the NBA, welcomes basketball fans with a slam dunk offer. Simply place a $10 moneyline wager on any game. If either team hits a three-pointer, you'll automatically receive $200 in bonus bets. Just use bonus code JERSEY200 when you place your bet. Enjoy this NBA season like never before with a variety of parlay selection features, player props, and the best daily promotions in the business. Download the app or go to BetMGM.com and use bonus code JERSEY200 to win $200 in bonus bets if either team hits a three-pointer in the game you wager on. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. Must be 21 years of age or older to wager. New Jersey only. New customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. First online real money wager only. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets. Bonus bets expire 7 days from issuance. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hey, y'all. This is Dr. Joy Harden Bradford, host of the award-winning weekly podcast, Therapy for Black Girls. Our incredible community of sisters has been building the Therapy for Black Girls podcast for 5 years running. And over that time, we've published over 250 episodes and gained over 18 million podcast downloads. During this time, we've tackled the stigma surrounding mental health and shared conversations to help us all understand ourselves and others a little better. Hundreds of incredible licensed mental health care professionals and other experts have joined us to share tips on taking better care of ourselves. We flipped through the pages of your favorite romance novels with author Tia Williams, checked in with Grammy Award-winning artist Michelle Williams, and discussed the hurdles of balancing competitive sports, motherhood, and mental health with Olympic athlete Natasha Hastings. 5 years down and many more years of work to be done. Join us now by checking out the Therapy for Black Girls podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And so on that topic, like you said, you were surrounded by music. Music was always an important part of your life. And I know that clearly New York City was a hotbed for a lot of things that were happening, especially within the more independent minded stuff. But how did, I guess, punk and hardcore get introduced to you? Was it just through friends at school? Was it just kind of existing on the street? What was the vibe?
No one at school. Like I was up in the Bronx, and at that time there wasn't really that. There was like there was nothing even close. It was like it was at the time where kind of house music, it was like hip hop, there was like house music, and then there was kind of like the electronic kind of like freestyle music that was happening. There were people starting to get into like the precursor of like house music, where they started to look really kind of like a little bit more like exaggerated. They started to have different kind of wilder haircuts and stuff. And I thought that was really interesting. And then it reminded me of one time when my mother took me downtown. We were walking, and I had seen these people with mohawks and jackets and stuff. And I was like, that is really interesting. And through a conversation with my cousin, the one who had cousin who got me into music, he was like, "Oh, there's this guy downtown. He told me about punk and he had some, and I'm pretty sure he was lying, but he was like made up some guy, some mythical king of the punks who lived downtown." And I was like really intrigued. And I made my way to a place called Danceteria, and also CBGB's. And I started just going on my own and picking up what I could by myself. Like my friends in the Bronx were not interested. And as I evolved and my aesthetic started to change with what, I was seeing, that the place for me in the Bronx became less and less inviting. And I just wound up having to make friends on my own downtown. And that's how I got into the punk scene. And that led over to the hardcore scene.
Right. That must have been a wild experience for you, navigating that, essentially by yourself, and having these two, Danceteria and CBGBs, like those, obviously the stuff of legends in regards to both of those vaulted.
Being underage and having no guide, and just like,
right.
Realizing later that I was like taking the little money I had from my mother leaving lunch money and stuff for like buying records. I found Bleecker Bob's somehow, and I was buying records off of like things I saw painted on people's jackets. And like what I didn't know was that I was going to Danceteria, walking right past the hardcore shows, going up to the goth floor and buying goth records with my money, thinking I was getting more into punk, but I was actually getting into bands like Alien, Sex Fiend, Early Cure, The Cult, and Batcave Records. And I'm like, I'm so punk, but I realized I was like, wow, I was pretty goth actually.
Right. And I really love that description of it, because as a young person, you are devoid of context and you are just operating off of instinct. You're just like, I like this, so I'm going to consume it. You don't care if it's a part of a scene.
Well, I thought I was trying to get myself into a scene, I guess. I was coming out of a scene.
That's true. That's true.
Coming out of a world, and the world was slowly, incrementally rejecting me, because they were like, I don't know what you're doing, but I don't like it. And I had like one friend who was kind of like, oh yeah, it's cool. He introduced me to the Police, and I was like, this is cool. I remember seeing on cable access, seeing Twisted Sister, and I was like, this is wild.
Yeah.
So I just kind of saw these people who were like, I was coming from a world where people were painting things and like writing graffiti and being a graffiti writer, to seeing people more painting themselves. And I thought that was, that was just a trip to me. And,
oh, sure.
So eventually I made my way downtown and made friends one at a time.
That's very cool. And as you started to bring the subculture home, and I know that you've expressed that your parents were very permissive and excited about your, your creative pursuits, were they ever, especially from the aesthetic choices, whether it was, like bringing mohawks home and like, oh, this is what vegetarianism is, and like, this is what straight edge is. Like, did they ever kind of, look at you with a side eyes, being like, Sergio, what are you doing, man?
Oh, well, yeah, I had to give a presentation to my mother. She was not into it at all. She was like, I don't know what you're doing. This is, because her thing was all Like it was like Latin, and
Right.
but she's a professor, and I had to just make a presentation and kind of make the correlation between the belief system, punk, and the things that were important to her. I was like, these share values, even though the aesthetic's different. And then she got that. So after I had made a proper presentation, she understood it.
I sorry to interrupt, but I just the idea of you sitting there in front of your mother doing, like, I mean, obviously it wasn't PowerPoint, but just like the intellects, I'm totally mispronouncing the name, but just trying to intellectualize the idea of what this scene is and trying to identify with her on that level is incredible.
Yeah, and I remember reading discharge lyrics that were more based on the eco-socioeconomic structure of things, and just saying, hey, look, you guys, you're all on the same page. These are people coming from a different place with a different thing, from a different country, different whole thing, but you're aligned. And, don't let the appearance trick you. And then, so with that, she became more accepted. And even with my musical pursuits, she didn't enjoy them at all. And only recently admitted to me that she had no idea where I was going with this, but kept her mouth shut. I thought she was like with it, but she was more like, I was scared. And right when I was about to say something, you pulled it together and started making it your living.
Right. Before it actually came down to the, sit down intervention, Sergio, you need to put the bass in the closet for a little bit.
This wing. That surprised me.
Right. And again, I asked this earlier, but I don't think I drilled down on it with the idea of school. Like, did you actually get okay grades? Like, what was the?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I made it through high school. But when I got into like punk, I kind of went all in, and it was like, forget the system. And I kind of just mailed it in at the end, which impacted my college, career. And then I got into college non-matriculated, but I was so into this punk thing that school was the system. And I was like, forget it, which was baffling to my mother as a professor, and my father, who worked at that point for the Board of Ed. They were just kind of like, I don't know what this guy's doing.
Right. And so as you started to, become really immersed and, like you said, collecting these friends within the scene and like-mindedness of it, did you notice in regards to, I mean, I know New York City is definitely a melting pot of a lot of different cultures and races. Was there, did you make the observation of, once you started to go to shows, like, oh, I am, one of the only, Hispanics, Latin people here at the show. Like, it's just a bunch of, white dudes jumping on each other. Or was that even a thought process that entered your brain at that point?
No, the cool thing about downtown at that time was that was not the case.
Sure.
What it was that it was a real melting pot of people from varying parts of the city that had similar stories to me. And they were all either, maybe some of them, since we're all younger, some of them would be like, maybe they were a year before me or come a year after, but they all had a similar story of being attracted to this other thing that didn't fit the aesthetic of their family or their background or their friends, and being compelled to find a place where they could actually be accepted. And there were people from all walks of life and all different kinds of cultures that were just congregating and finding places like CB's and Danceteria. It wasn't a white thing, it was like an aesthetic and thing about like a belief system, or just kind of not fitting in, or kind of something, like there was something that was going on that compelled people to express themselves in this way and find this area.
Right. No, that's really cool. And
especially my group was a hodgepodge of people from all kinds of things and like all different economic situations. Some were well off, some were just moderate, some were poor, but we all had this one thing.
That's really cool. And I know you played obviously in Absolution, and that was probably your first quote unquote serious band from that perspective. Or was there something, I presume you played in bands prior to that, but maybe not as serious and actually like recording and stuff like that.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Was there, no, it's okay. Was there experience prior to Absolution with bands, I presume?
Absolution was, I guess at the time, like I had a couple of bands prior to that, but everything at that age was super short lived.
Mm-hmm.
So and they kind of involved people that were in other bands or whatever. So I had a band called Trauma with some guys from Nausea. It lasted like a few months, enough to make a cassette, play a couple of shows. I had a band called Irate with the singer from Straight Ahead and this guy Jerry Williams on guitar, who was responsible for recording a lot of like things like the Roar cassette and early Cro-Mags and Antidote. But everything was super short lived. And I had a band called Collapse that wound up on a couple of compilations. And I wound up taking over for the bassist in Absolution, which was like my first situation of joining something that had songs in that already existed.
Right.
And, that I came in at the tail end of it. And so it broke out, and then I we just had nothing for almost a year, and Quicksand happened.
Right. And as you started to, play shows and do that with Absolution more in particular, were you, I guess, always comfortable on stage, or was that something that you had to kind of work yourself up to, as you started to progress through playing in different bands?
I was comfortable because I didn't think of it as like performing for an audience as much as like I'm part of a community.
Okay.
And I'm part of a scene, and like, there was very little difference between being in the crowd and being in the, being on stage. Like half the crowd spent half the time on the stage. Half the people in the audience who were kind of like dancing and going off in the pit were like more charismatic than some of the bands playing. So it was like everybody was performing. I didn't feel I didn't feel that. Later with Quicksand, I started getting nervous because it felt like there was a different dynamic, even though it was still similar. But like once we started playing shows, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is different. And I had to work through that.
Right. And with the idea that you started to, collaborate with more people, I mean, especially once Quicksand came into play and that was, being built from the ground up. And like you said, that was, a different vibe in regards to like once you started to play shows, I was like, wow, there's like, 500-600 people here. This is crazy. When do you feel, I guess in particular with Quicksand, like when did it become, for lack of a better term, like real, where you felt like it doesn't even necessarily need to be like this big show you played, or like, when do you sign to, Polydor or Island or whatever? Is there a moment where you felt like, you were on kind of the right track, so to speak?
I think immediately, because it was interesting at the time from coming from a different sect than the other guys, like not having the straight edge background, and then playing with Walter and Tom and Alan were doing Beyond, and they were bringing something different. And Walter was already like, more accomplished in terms of he had toured already. He was kind of already international. And I felt like, oh, this is a cool kind of meeting of different aspects of this world. And it felt, with those guys having the connections to Revelation Records and making an EP pretty quickly, I was like, wow, this is it's on. It's on. I felt like, man, I made a record. I made it.
Right.
I didn't, I was like, this is it. This is what it is. This is great. And that was amazing.
Right.
Really, so I'm always thankful for being introduced to those guys by a mutual friend named Gavin Van Black, who is in Absolution and Burn after that.
Yep.
He connected us.
That's very cool. And as you started to become more immersed in general with the hardcore and punk scene, with the, all of these different ideas from either, political stripes and like opening up people's eyes to, maybe different lines of thinking, what attracted you towards, those particular trains of thoughts, or even if it's just like something as you started to attend shows, like the visceral nature of it, what kind of brought you in?
I think, for like the different aspects that I got introduced to through it, veganism was easy because I really just didn't like eating meat, and I didn't know that you had an option. So I have probably one of the easiest kind of like paths to veganism. Once I learned from the band Crass that it was a diet, I was like, I'm on it. And I just didn't enjoy it. And as far as like politics, and I was able to make a quick connection between things that were important, at my mother's events, and the idea of like culture and community and family, and see that this was operating on the same wavelength. And as far as aesthetics, it was kind of like, just made sense. It made sense, like coming from like graffiti and coming from having parents who were into visual arts, seeing the idea of expressing yourself in that way was something that was really cool.
Totally.
And so having these things, and I felt like this was self-contained. Like I felt like this is something that's affirming itself, and it's really, really interesting. I felt like it was checking all the boxes, and
right.
I felt so fulfilled, and I felt like I had arrived. So like in doing that, even though with no prospects of making a living, I felt like I had made it.
Right. And, I'm sure as you were, building Quicksand and starting to, be more active with that, I'm sure you were just kind of, working random jobs that revolved around the idea of like, well, I may have to leave for a couple of weeks because I have to go out and tour. What were the hustles that you were getting into around that time?
All health food stores. I just worked in health food stores because that was the way, everyone had a job at one particular health food store, but I had a job at a different one. But everyone worked at a place called Prana, and they had a restaurant called Ahimsa. And the guy who ran it, I know all these kids were working there, and I know that he knew they were giving away the farm, and he just allowed it to happen. He just was like, I can say with a high degree of certainty, he was just there to support these kids who were all kind of just seemed just like outcasts, and allow them to have a place to work, and allow them to have a place to have a vegan diet that they couldn't afford, by allowing the cashiers who were kids to check out the food at a steep discount. And
so cool.
That was a thing. I know it. There's no way.
Right.
There's no way that. And we would do the same at like Ahimsa. Our friends would work there. It's like, oh, we got Ray from Youth today is working in the kitchen. And you'd go down the corner and you'd see the Bad Brains there, and the back window would open and a little, bag of food would come out. Like nobody really had money. And I can, with a high degree of certainty, say that he helped support a belief system and a way of being on his dime.
Yeah. That's incredible to hear, because I do think that in the same way that, like Kinko's, once people started to, do zines and, print out their demo covers and stuff like that, the amount of bands that Kinko's has unknowingly funded, which is obviously a completely different story than what you're articulating, but it's just that
exactly the same. It's and someone there knows, and someone there's turning a blind eye, right? It's exactly.
Totally. Yeah, totally. They're just like, all right, here's the, you go in at 2 a.m. Here's the copy card, and then go ahead, run, 100 copies of your zine. I'm not going to tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you think about I think that someone like that who notices and sees it goes, you know what? These are kids with limited means trying to do good things.
Totally. And honestly, like in what you're articulating about the, the health food store, that is true community service in a way that could never be quantify beyond the fact that, like you said, all of these people within this scene benefited from that and were able to ethically pursue what they were interested in because of that.
Yeah. There's no way that everyone could have afforded to maintain a vegan diet, without that help.
Totally. And just in the same way that, like, when you look at, Hare Krishnas and the vegetarian diets and the free food that they would be giving out, it's like, that's exactly the same idea where it's just like, oh yeah, like free food. And it happens to be vegetarian.
Oh yeah. A lot of kids did that too, which definitely led to the Krishna facet of the hardcore and punk scene.
Totally.
Yeah, because it spoke to some of the commonalities between the two worlds.
Absolutely. It's pulling those things together. Terror has a new full length that is coming out on May 6th. Alert, alert. The beautiful people at Pure Noise Records are releasing Pain into Power. It comes out on May 6th. You can easily pre-order it by going to purenoise.net. And it is their 8th studio album, which the last one came out in 2018. But, that was a whole different world back then. The amazing thing about Terror is not only are they one of the best hardcore bands around, but they are actually teaming up with their founding guitarist, Todd Jones, from Nails, and obviously was in the band towards the beginning. And they joined up with him. He handled a lot of production work, a lot of songwriting stuff. And it's amazing. Just listen to a snippet of this song. It's called Pain into Power, and you will be able to hear what is cooking in the Terror camp. There you go. I mean, Terror is such a mainstay within our scene, and they still kill it, putting out so much great music. And obviously, if you get a chance to catch them live and you've never seen them, oh my gosh, your life will change. They definitely are, in my opinion, a gateway hardcore band. Like, you can bring a friend to a show that has never heard hardcore before and watch Terror, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, this is unreal. So again, the record is called Pain into Power. It is out on May 6th. Go to purenoise.net. You can pre-order it, pre-save it. Can't wait for this thing to come out. I've heard it all. It is spectacular. So enjoy.
BetMGM, an authorized gaming partner of the NBA, welcomes basketball fans with a slam dunk offer. Simply place a $10 moneyline wager on any game. If either team hits a three-pointer, you'll automatically receive $200 in bonus bets. Just use bonus code JERSEY200 when you place your bet. Enjoy this NBA season like never before with a variety of parlay selection features, player props, and the best daily promotions in the business. Download the app or go to BetMGM.com and use bonus code JERSEY200 to win $200 in bonus bets if either team hits a three-pointer in the game you wager on. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. Must be 21 years of age or older to wager. New Jersey only. New customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. First online real money wager only. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets. Bonus bets expire 7 days from issuance. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hey, y'all. This is Dr. Joy Harden Bradford, host of the award-winning weekly podcast, Therapy for Black Girls. Our incredible community of sisters has been building the Therapy for Black Girls podcast for 5 years running. And over that time, we've published over 250 episodes and gained over 18 million podcast downloads. During this time, we've tackled the stigma surrounding mental health and shared conversations to help us all understand ourselves and others a little better. Hundreds of incredible licensed mental health care professionals and other experts have joined us to share tips on taking better care of ourselves. We flipped through the pages of your favorite romance novels with author Tia Williams, checked in with Grammy Award-winning artist Michelle Williams, and discussed the hurdles of balancing competitive sports, motherhood, and mental health with Olympic athlete Natasha Hastings. 5 years down and many more years of work to be done. Join us now by checking out the Therapy for Black Girls podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
iHeartRadio and Grim and Mild present Bridgewater Season 2.
A lot of people now actually believe that there is some kind of mystical force in this region that attracts monsters and paranormal activity.
The Bridgewater Triangle. Now, that sounds about right.
You're still denying that there's something beyond our understanding going on here?
Starring Supernatural's Misha Collins, The Walking Dead's Melissa Ponzio, and Rogue One's Alan Tudyk. Written by Lauren Shippen and created by me, Aaron Mahnke.
Something about all of this doesn't feel right.
Hello? Is someone there?
Something went wrong here.
Olivia, we should hurry.
We have a much bigger problem.
What is that?
Olivia, run!
Listen to Bridgewater now on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And learn more over at grimandmild.com/Bridgewater.
So as you started to tour more actively with Quicksand and, enter these business relationships with managers and labels and stuff like that, how was your, perception or interaction with the music business side of things? Was it something that you kind of, knew to be a necessary evil to kind of keep the band moving? Was it something you enjoyed participating in? Where was your vibe there?
I think it was interesting in that everything happened incrementally, although quickly. So it felt like a natural progression. And it started to, there was a little bit of tension internally if we wanted to make that step, especially where we came from. But ultimately there was the overall agreement that we could do it our way to a certain extent. And that it was, I never looked at it as a necessary evil. I just looked at it as a logical progression. And it spoke to certain needs and gave us certain resources to kind of like be better and have gear. Like when we were traveling and go on tour, especially through parts of the country where there's where the expenses are different. A lot of bands had a lot better gear than us. They had a lot better vehicles, and it was an opportunity to say, "Oh wow, we can actually get some proper gear and some things in travel." Like our van had plexiglass windows that were constantly getting pushed in, and our seats weren't attached to the floor, and now we can actually ride in something that is safe, and we can have some gear that's all ours, and actually have instruments that can get maintained. So that was. I didn't feel like we had to sacrifice ourselves and our way of being to have this.
Right. No, that's cool. And I know that there were the machine that you guys started to go on in regards to the way that bands had to operate as far as touring, 300 days out of the year, and you guys having to go, on these tours that maybe aesthetically or sonically didn't make that much sense, led to the band obviously dissolving. How do you feel, as you reflect on when you guys did break up? Do you feel like that was, the right time to do that? Or do you feel like it could have gone on a little longer for you personally? Where was your head at as the things kind of started to, dissolve?
I think my head was in the wrong place. I think that we had burnout, mm-hmm. and we were trying to, we were definitely not on the same page. We were just playing way too much. And just had a bit of burnout, and tried to, internally we weren't really in agreement of even discussing what to do next. And then ultimately, at that time, it just disbanded. And if I would have had the perspective that I had now, it would have been like, yeah, we can just take a couple of years off. Even at this point, we can do whatever, but that wasn't, I was very binary at that time. It was like, we do it or we don't do it. What do we do? Everyone was like, I need to know what the tomorrow is. And I was like, I would never ever, look at things that black and white. But although I think that was unfortunate and didn't need to be, what I can say is that it allowed us to do things independently that and probably would have happened anyways, but we were able to do things independently that gave us even more appreciation for each other. And when the stars aligned to reform, it was done with an understanding that, like, at least for myself, I could, took things like chemistry for granted. I was like, yeah, you just get people together. I really appreciated the chemistry that I have with everybody, and appreciated what we do and how we sound, and I could see how much it shaped me and changed me and influenced the things that I did. And I could see that in Walter with the things he was doing after, and the things that Alan did and the things that Tom did. We all kind of like evolved. So when it came back together, I could say there was so much more of an appreciation for it and each other.
Sure. It was like, yeah, I'm sure in some respects it was like, putting on a old pair of slippers where it was like, oh guys, this feels nice. Remember how cool this was?
Yeah, but it's weird because it's like the slippers were newer and more fancy. Like it I felt like it went from what felt like an old pair of slippers that you felt you can replace anywhere, and then you realize that these are like some sort of one-of-one boutique designer slippers that no one else can ever have except for those four people, or us who comprise the band. That was the thing. You don't get those slippers anywhere else. You can get cool slippers and even great slippers, but these are one-of-ones.
Totally. No, I love that. And I know when stepping onto the Deftones platform, and they brought you in to a very evolved and already pretty fast moving vehicle, so to speak, and it seems like you blended in very, very well. Was it I guess shocking for you to acclimate to certain things? What were surprising to you, seeing like the level that the band was at, because clearly that was, a level much larger than you had ever previously experienced. What was surprising for you on that initial journey?
Well, it was interesting because like the precursor to that was meeting them on the first Warped Tour. Mm-hmm. And seeing that there was a sort of commonality, not that they were not from our scene, but they revered. I was sold on the fact that they loved the Bad Brains. Someone told me they loved the Bad Brains. Go see them. Went to go see them on the Warped Tour, because they were on a leg of the tour that the first one that we were on, and I was like, wow, they're bringing the catharticism and the energy, like especially seeing how Chi was going off and just seeing the band in general. Was like they're bringing what we bring without the context of being part of the scene, and they also see the greatness of the Bad Brains. So I must meet these guys, and I went and met them, and kind of connected with Chi a little bit, got to connect with the other guys a bit, and that was it. In '99, I get a call to fill in for Chi, and because he had to go home from tour, he hurt himself. And it was cool because I had already vibed with him, and I kind of knew that at that point we had a mutual thing for each other's playing. He had started playing Fender basses because he had seen me kick one across the stage, and he was like, wow, if I can handle him, I want that. And so we had this kind of thing, even though I didn't get to know him well. And so, I kind of went in and filled in on that tour, and they were starting, to come up. So they were already somewhere, and in that tour, there was a really good chemistry. And at some point, Gina was like, hey, if we asked you to join, would you join? And I was like, no, she's the guy, she's already my boy, and they're all my friends. And I didn't confuse the excitement of gelling with the need to replace somebody who's already amazing,
Right.
And then that happened, just moved on, and then you have the tragedy of 2009, where she got into his accident, and that was terrible. And I'm catching them at a real crossroads, where they have Eros that's not quite finished, and I was kind of like, when I was around, it kind of came to my attention that there wasn't a lot of excitement about it, and the label wasn't keen on releasing it. It was probably maybe considering parting ways with the band. And Nick Raskulinix came in, and my understanding was that they were going to, instead of giving them some severance money, that they can use that money to make what became Diamond Eyes. So having already the momentum of a friendship and having the catharticism of the what had happened to Chi and what was going on with the band in general, and having someone like Nick to really hone that, created something that was super special. So like by the time we took a stage, like we'd have been around each other intensely for a while. And I just felt like, and I've always felt like, yeah, I'm here putting my best foot forward in a situation for friends. And they're giving, they wanted me, when I came in, they were like, hey, we just want what you are, what you're doing, what you're bringing. That stuff you brought to Quicksand, bring to us. So I came in right off the bat, like writing and collaborating and having that sense of family and community that I came up in.
Yeah, that's really, I appreciate that picture that you painted, because I do think that because you had this, not only this common experience, but common language to be able to work from, it was like, I remember the announcement of like, oh yeah, Sergio is going to, officially join the Deftones. It's just like, oh yeah, of course he is. Like, it just makes total sense. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, you need to build to it. But
for some people for people who knew my history and our history, it made sense. And there was an overwhelming, part of their supporters that had never heard of Quicksand, with good reason, and didn't know who I was. So, that was a whole nother thing to contend with. But by the time we took the stage, what was cool was like, since we had been around each other playing, we had this thing, we had made a record, and it felt like we were in a rehearsal space, but but the walls got lifted, because it was like the same setup that we had been, that we had for all this time. And now we're just presenting it in front of people. And it just felt nice. I just felt like I didn't feel the pressure of taking someone's place. I felt the energy and the excitement of being present and putting myself, out and forward for people that I hold dear, and people that are friends, and appreciate, again, coming from always appreciating situations and musical pursuits and community and family. That was always my lens.
Totally. That's really cool. And you've always been creating music, through the duration of you playing in band, like active touring bands. And you've always expressed yourself in a lot of different ways when it comes to music, which kind of echoes back to not only your upbringing, but then just the different styles that you have probably gotten into through other people. Where do you kind of place that need to create while you're also, playing in a quote unquote active full-time touring band?
Well, with doing like my time in Deftones before Quicksand reformed, was like, it was cool because it was like an opportunity to collaborate and write and ride this wave and have this energy with people who are really talented and really open to collabing and creating. And then during that time, Quicksand reforms, and that became exciting because, there was the momentum of seeing things work out well with Deftones after everything the band had been through, and seeing that work well for Quicksand. All that stuff just makes me more inspired and excited to do more, and also stay in shape for the things that need to be done. So like if I would come home, then I'd want to do things just to stay in sharp for writing. Like I felt like if I let myself get cold, then anxiety would creep in, and I'd be concerned about like being good enough or like being up to speed to I didn't want to waste people's time. I didn't want to waste my time by not being up to speed. So when I was home, I would play a lot and write and keep doing things just so that when it came time, that I was just always in the flow.
Right. Like you would be ready once whatever it is that came up.
Yeah. And I think so I kind of like when I had one perspective as when I was really young of like, oh, you're in your band and you do your thing and you shouldn't be doing other things and, whatever. I was like, well, that just leaves you cold. And that's not going to work.
Right. Absolutely.
I realized the opposite to be true. There was always going to be the thing of time management, always going to be the idea that, you sacrifice downtime. But like, if you're doing something you love, like that's what I'd be doing anyways. Right. So.
Sure. Totally. And a few last notes I wanted to hit with touring. I know that, you have experienced your wide variety of shows from the smallest to the largest and different experiences from, van life, bus life, and everything in between. How has your relationship with touring evolved? Like, I presume part of you obviously still enjoys it, but, has there been moments where it has felt more, I guess, the least enjoyable part of playing in a band?
I think the only time it became difficult for me a little bit over time was dealing with the kind of like the situation like towards like with Deftones and kind of that I spoke about in the thing of like wanting to really be in the band after that time and being kind of in the band as a core writer and a core person contributor on one end, but on tour, it's when it kind of comes clear you're not really in the band.
Sure.
And that started to affect me, kind of like mentally and my sense of something. It was something that after having a life of always being a part of something and always contributing and always being there and coming into something with the understanding that, the intent was to come a full-fledged member in some way, and have that not occur started to really become problematic for me in terms of just like my well-being and feeling connected on tour, which was a first for me. And that started to really impact me,
Sure. Yeah.
So it became something that, that like I would try to always address and be like, hey, this is the way we're supposed to be. This is what should be happening at this point as explained, but like, and there wasn't really the willingness to kind of like come together on that end.
Sure. Totally.
So that became tough.
Yep. With the, I know that especially more so probably with Quicksand, a lot of stuff was, kind of thrown your guys' direction in regards to either, tours and like sort of outside of the box experiences for you guys, whether it was, doing this one-off radio show or whatever, and like, probably still happens to you guys. I always like to ask this question because I find it interesting from a, just a business perspective. I'm sure like the type of syncs that you've been approached where it's like, oh, let's use your commercial for, German BMW commercial or whatever that case may be. Do you have any random stories that kind of stick out in your head as far as like either something that came to fruition or something that did not come to fruition because, for reasons A, B, and C?
No, Quicksand wound up in Empire Records, wound up in a couple of things that were really cool. And, more so with Deftones, we would get proposals and say, hey, this song, we want to use this song for this, want to use this song for that. And that was always something that was presented to us. And usually it would be something kind of cool and something they were like, yeah, of course,
That's
so that was always breezy.
Yeah. Totally. Do you remember one that was I guess for lack of a better term, like lucrative, but then also gave you pause because you're like, that doesn't feel right. Like we can't do that.
No, because I think the thing with a lot of licensing is that they're not as lucrative as one would think. They're just kind of like more like it's a licensing with like for them, it's like a one-time fee. I mean, I don't know how it works. I forget how it works on the back end.
Sure.
But like seeing like an instrumental chop up of the song Tempest, wind up in one of the Fast and Furious movies, that was pretty cool.
Right. I did not know that happened. That is very cool. And like we were actually talking about off mic, but the, veganism has been a very important part of your life. And it's something that, you actively speak about and share to anybody that is interested in that. What's kept you, I guess, connected to that? Because I know how you were introduced to that, but what keeps you, I guess, engaged with that as time has evolved?
Well, again, like fortunately, like when I was younger, my grandfather used to cook for the family, and like when, let's say, he made chicken, I would kind of see it, and I'd be like, it would just kind of be off-putting. I was like, I see bones and veins, and it was just like never sat right with me. I did have no problem, however, eating cold cuts and stuff. So I was like, all right, as long as there's this disconnect, I could do it. But again, learning through CRAS that there was this diet, I did it, and I never felt like I was sacrificing anything. And if anything, some of the things like cold cuts and some of the things that I enjoyed as a meat eater became available, in plant-based form. And so it just keeps getting easier.
Totally.
And it just keeps getting easier, and like seeing some of the benefits, like whereas like it wasn't a health thing, but seeing like some of the ancillary benefits of like how my health has been impacted by, at least when I eat well, because again, just being vegan itself is not healthy.
Right.
But like seeing that it has an impact, and my mother became primarily vegan, mostly vegetarian, but like how that impacted her heart health, and in regards to the rest of her family and the rest of our family on her side, I was like, yeah, these things are they bring some benefit if you're doing it right. But mainly for me, it's never been a sacrifice. It's always been pretty easy. So it's hard for me to preach to people on how to do it, because it's like, it was never a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last / maybe most important question is the fact that what is the best Quicksand song in your opinion, and why is it Shovel?
Honestly, it's like every time I get asked that, it's like you get asked to choose a favorite child.
Of course.
But then everyone has a favorite child, but they kind of switch depending on the day or whatever those kids happen to be in their lives and what they're doing. So
totally, yeah. I had to front load the question because Shovel is just, I mean, like that. It's funny because like every time I trip across that song and listen to it, I just like I'm like. I just love the fact that it appears on Norm's comp, and then that's it, and then that's all you're gonna get. So cool. But anyways,
yeah, it's funny too, because I think that when we talk about that song in retrospect, Alan, it's one of Alan's favorite songs too. It's like, and I love playing it. We all love it, and it's one of those things where if we have the perspective we had now, then it would have been on our album,
right?
I think at the time it was something that maybe like it felt like too accessible.
Right. It's like, yeah, this is too straightforward and too like verse chorusy or whatever.
Yeah, we don't want to do that as a chorus. No.
That's incredible that was that could have been part of the thought process of not including it.
Yeah, it just and a lot of times there's things, and it happens often. Sometimes a song that's really good, and when you're making a sequence or even doing a set list, but a sequence lives forever. And sometimes something good or that is even great you can't find a place for it to sit.
True. Like the sequencing of it. Right. Yeah. No, I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've had that with Deftones as well, where it's like, oh, this is a solid song, but where does it sit? And it's throwing off everything. So, and I know that happens with movies. Things don't make, things get left on the editing room floor because you have to have an overarching perspective in order to bring it home. If you get too caught up on like the micro, you can mess up the macro.
That is a true artist speak, my friend, and I love it.
More like producer talk. That's kind of something you learn later. When you're young, you're just like, I just want more bass. Everyone's like, I want more of my instrument. Later, you realize that maybe there's something better than just turning yourself up.
That's true. Wow, I think that's like better advice than most people could come up with in 4 hours of conversation. Well, Sergio, thank you so much for letting me walk you through your life. And I really appreciate all of the music you've contributed, and then also being a thoughtful, caring human being. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Very cool of Sergio to hang out with us on this podcast and share all of his stories and musical influences and all the other good stuff that we uncover. So thank you very much to Sergio. Thank you very much to Tim, his publicist, for hooking this up. I very much appreciate that. I'm actually releasing a bonus episode of the podcast tomorrow, so pay attention to it. It is with Andrew Cannon, who is from Santa Cruz Skateboards, and he also plays in a band called Worship. And we talk about DNA, which is it's kind of random, but trust me, it makes sense once you hear our conversation. But yeah, bonus episode coming tomorrow. And and then I'll tell you, what's happening after that whenever you decide to tune into the podcast after that. Basically, I just don't want to reveal anything more than the podcast that's dropping tomorrow. So anyways, until then, please be safe, everybody.
You know what it's like to endlessly seek a remedy. Are you ready for a prescription that's once daily, steroid-free?
VTAMA Tapinarof Cream 1% is a prescription topical treatment for adults with plaque psoriasis. Do not use if you're allergic to VTAMA Cream. The most common side effects of VTAMA Cream include red raised bumps around the hair pores, pain or swelling in the nose and throat, skin rash or irritation, including itching and redness, peeling, burning or stinging, headache, itching, and flu. Tell your doctor about all the medicines you take, and if you're pregnant or plan to be, ask your doctor if VTAMA Cream is right for you. You deserve more from your topical. To learn more, visit topicaluprising.com.
Your favorite podcast, Therapy for Black Girls, is celebrating 5 years of empowering conversations as we continue to make mental health and wellness accessible. In addition to weekly chats with some of your favorite mental health professionals and other experts, we've flipped through the pages of your favorite romance novels with author Tia Williams, checked in with Grammy Award-winning artist Michelle Williams, and talked hurdles in sports, motherhood, and mental health with Olympic athlete Natasha Hastings. From our team to your podcast app, join us in celebrating 5 years of the Therapy for Black Girls podcast. Check it out on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.